I was very excited by the theme of this year's conference, The Edge of the Unknown, because to me, not knowing, the openness of not knowing, is at the very heart of what this is all about. It seems to me that not knowing is at the heart of how science operates, and it's at the heart of spiritual awakening. And I titled this talk, The Freedom of Nothing to Grasp, because in my experience, freedom, love, peace, joy is found when the grasping mind relaxes. And there are many words for that: openness, surrendering, melting, dissolving. And as I see it, this whole spiritual thing boils down to something incredibly simple. It boils down to right here, right now, being awake right here, right now. Or as someone famously said, being here now. And of course, in the beginning, that seems like a kind of practice or path in which we kind of shift our attention from the thoughts and mental movies and stories and beliefs to the simplicity of bare perceiving, sensing, breathing, hearing, seeing, smelling, tasting, just the sensory reality of this moment. And also we begin to be aware of the thinking mind and what kinds of thought patterns are running through the mind, and we begin to see how we do our suffering. We begin to see how suffering happens. We begin to notice patterns like always thinking about the future, or always thinking about the past, or telling ourselves the story that we've ruined our whole life, or whatever it is. And the more clearly we see the mechanism of our suffering, the more it dissolves naturally by itself. It doesn't really work to go to war with our suffering, or to try to get rid of the self, or to try to get rid of all of our difficulties and so on. It's more like just seeing them clearly. They naturally dissolve, not necessarily on the timetable we have in mind, and they always dissolve now. They can't dissolve at any other time. So if we're waiting for them to dissolve in the future, that's suffering. Or if we're remembering how they did dissolve once in the past, that's suffering. They can only really dissolve right now, and they can't dissolve by us trying to make them dissolve, because that's really just thought masquerading as me, the little self, trying to make this happen. It's more about just seeing the whole thing and allowing it to dissolve by itself. And if it doesn't dissolve, if there's some pattern that's just persistent, then just being with that, just letting that be as it is. And the more we stop fighting it and just allow it to be here and see it clearly, the less power it has, and the more it begins to open up on its own. And eventually we come to realize that being here now, while it started out seeming like a kind of path or practice, is actually a description of the nature of reality, that in fact we can't not be here now. Here now is all there is. Here now is our true nature, the true nature of everything. And by here now, I don't mean San Jose, California on Sunday afternoon, because that's appearing here now. What I mean by here now is this timeless, placeless, eternal present that never leaves. No matter what time of day is showing up, no matter what season of the year it is, no matter how old we are, it's always showing up now. Have you noticed that? And no matter what location is showing up, whether it's San Jose or the airport or Paris or Oregon or whatever, it's always showing up here in this present. We're always here, and it's always now. So that's the very nature of reality, being here now. And we can't ever actually leave here now. We can have thoughts about the future and memories of the past and thoughts about somewhere else, but they all arise here now. And the more we give attention to here now, well, there's a wonderful discovery that keeps happening, and as far as I know, there's no end to that discovery. Just finding out that when you bring your attention to the present moment, to what's actually happening here now, it doesn't have the kind of solidity and continuity of forms that it seems to have when we're thinking about it. You know, when we have a word like my body, and then it seems like that's some solid thing, my body. But when we actually pay attention to the body, just tune into the body with awareness, we find something that isn't solid at all. It's ever-changing sensations, movement, it's fluid, it's inseparable, it's permeable, inseparable from everything around it. And that's true of everything. So when we really give open attention to here now, we discover fluidity and ever more subtlety and openness. And we discover also that here now is always here. So it's both ever present and ever changing. And we're always kind of looking for something to get hold of, aren't we? I mean, we're always kind of looking for the answer, the final understanding, or maybe the ultimate experience, the great breakthrough, final enlightenment, the finish line, something to grasp. And yet, I don't know if you've noticed, but everything that we grasp turns out to be disappointing or unsatisfying in some way ultimately. It may initially be satisfying, but sooner or later it begins to disappoint us or be unsatisfying in some way. And we can't really grasp anything either, because as Heraclitus said, what did he say? We never step into the same river twice, and we're not the same stepper from one second to the next. We're more like whirlpools than we are like solid things. And so anything we try to grasp, it's like trying to grasp clouds or smoke. We can't really get hold of anything. So if we're trying to get hold of something that we call love or happiness, I mean, on a practical level, we can grasp things like a chair and that's functional, but I'm talking about love, peace, happiness, freedom. We can't grasp those things. They're there when the grasping falls away. They're the natural state, as it were, that's there when the grasping falls away. They're the nature, peace, love, joy, freedom, all those nice sounding words. That's the nature of here now. That's the nature of this awareing presence that we are. And when we tune into this awareing presence, it's not my awareing presence or your awareing presence. It's undivided, it's seamless, it's whole. It includes everything, all of this whole room, all of these different shapes and colors and forms and people and chairs are appearing in this vast, spacious, awareing presence that we are. When I was a Zen student years ago, we used to have to sit these long sessions where you had to sit in the lotus position for days on end, and you'd be in excruciating pain. And one of the things I learned from that is that if you resist the pain, it gets worse and worse and worse and worse. But if you just relax into it and completely bring your attention into it and just open into it, suddenly it's not really painful anymore, and it starts to shift and move and dissolve. And that is true of emotional pain as well. When we really, instead of thinking about it and telling the story about it, when we just really come back to being with the sensory experiencing of it, something shifts. It's a little dangerous to say that because the mind then wants to, do that so that it will shift, which doesn't really work. It's more like just accepting and allowing everything to be the way it is, and recognizing that that's actually something that it's not like we have to do that. That is the very nature of awareness. That is the very nature of here now, to allow everything to be as it is, obviously, because it is as it is. So, I'm a very ordinary person, really. As in my experience, a lot of people have these dramatic awakenings, like, Eckhart Tolle, where they're all depressed and having a horrible time, and then they have this one night where everything falls away, apparently more or less permanently, and in a fairly complete way. That's very rare, but it does seem to happen to the occasional person, and many people have these big awakening stories, and I spent many years chasing after some kind of finish line, chasing after some kind of final enlightenment, and grasping at that, and trying to figure out what all these people had that I didn't have, or what they had lost that I still had, blah, blah, blah. And finally, I realized that whole adventure was all about me. It was all about this fictional little person that we think is authoring our thoughts, making our choices, living our life. I'm not saying there's nothing here that we call Joan Tollifson. There are definitely, but it's like a whirlpool. It's a pattern of energy that changes from second to second to second. There's nothing solid about it, and it's like the wave on the ocean. It's part of the ocean. It's inseparable from the other waves. So yes, there is something that we call Joan Tollifson, but it's nothing you can get hold of or grasp. And it's not, and that's different from, and this Joan Tollifson has certain qualities that we could describe, certain Enneagram type, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, but what we're talking about when we say there's no self, or when we're talking about the little me, that's this kind of thought story we have of being this separate unit of consciousness that's stuck inside this body, looking out at an alien world out there. and the idea that we are somehow running our show and making our choices and living our lives, and that we have to do a good job, and if we're, all that. And so I realized that the whole search for final enlightenment was all about the little me. It was all about, am I enlightened or not? Am I awake? Have I crossed the finish line? And finally, in seeing that, not in a big flash or anything, but I just sort of noticed eventually that I wasn't looking for that anymore, that whole search had just melted away. Not because I found final enlightenment, but just because the whole thing melted away. I mean, I realized there's just this. There's just this. And, sometimes the weather here is cloudy and stormy and overcast, and sometimes the weather here is sunny and bright and clear, and sometimes Joan is loving and wonderful and funny and compassionate and kind, and sometimes, frankly, she's a control freak. She's a perfectionist. She can get angry. And it all shows up here now in this amazing space. And at some point, it just becomes clear that it's not really personal. It's just weather. It's like the weather outside. It's the result of infinite causes and conditions, genetics, neurochemistry, childhood conditioning, all kinds of things, sleep apnea. There's 10 million things that affect the weather of the body-mind organism, and it's just weather. So is it possible to just be here, and to discover the holy reality, as I like to call it, right here, right now, in this moment? It's just right here. It's these shapes and colors, these sensations, these smells, these tastes, and also these thoughts. It's everything that's going on. Is it possible to just be here and to see how we have this tendency to want to grasp it and categorize it and label it and compartmentalize it? And all of that has its functional usefulness. We're not going to get rid of that. That's part of how life is moving. But we can begin to see that none of that is really true. So we can still have, California and Nevada, but we can recognize that there's no real boundary. And we can still play with ideas and thoughts, but we can recognize that we don't really know what this is. We can say it's all consciousness, but what is that? On the one hand, we know it directly. We know this. We have an undeniable sense of being here and an undeniable knowingness of this present happening that we can't deny or doubt. But as soon as we put a label on it, as soon as we say it's consciousness or it's atoms and molecules or something like that, we've moved into this realm of thought, labels. And they can be useful and functional. They can help us to see things and to point to things, and that's good. But let's not get stuck on them. Can there be a willingness to see something new that we might? One of the things I loved about one of my main teacher, Toni Packer, was that she was always open to seeing something new. Rather than holding on to what we think we know, what we think we've discovered. That's why I love the theme of the conference this year, the edge of the unknown, to really allow ourselves to fall into the not knowing, the endless, never-ending discovery that here now is. It's like whatever this is, this ultimate reality, is revealing itself, discovering itself, loving itself, unfolding itself, however you want to put it. And we are that. So I don't know, maybe we have some time left. Does anyone, maybe is there a microphone that we can, okay. Does anyone have a question that they'd like to ask? And wait for the microphone if you do. Anyone? Nothing? Oh, there's something. Someone, I mean. Something. I don't think the microphone is working. It's not working. I don't hear anything in that either.
Two.
Okay.
Hi.
Yes,
okay.
hi.
I feel a wonderful energy from you. I was just wondering, like, what your meditative practices or spiritual practices are, and also any suggestions on maximizing the probability or possibility of getting closer towards enlightenment, any steps?
Well, first of all, just notice the nature of that question, that question sort of starts with the assumption that you need to get closer to something or maximize something, that you're going towards something. So notice how that very question sort of creates the mirage of this isn't it. I'm not there yet. I need something to get me there. And just to see that every time it arises, to see that the way that kind of thought, which we all know, that kind of thought instantly creates the mirage of me and time and space and distance, and this isn't it, and it's out there somewhere, and what do I do to get there? So that's the first thing I would say, and the most important thing I would say. And then there are many, many practices, and my sense is that we find what we need. That's been my experience. We find what we need, and for some people it may be one consistent thing for their whole life, and for other people it may be many different things, ever changing. And to really trust what comes up for you, to trust that if you have an impulse to pray, that's okay. If you have an impulse to sit in meditation, that's okay. If you have an impulse to leave praying and meditation behind and just to hang out in your armchair, that's okay. That there isn't one right way. As for me, I don't have any consistent practice anymore. I mean, I've done all kinds of things, Zen and nameless meditation and Advaita and satsang and all kinds of different things, but really, I mean, I tend to sit quietly every morning and every evening for a little while. Sometimes I sit on a little cushion in the Burmese position. Sometimes I sit in my armchair, and I find that the armchair communicates something different to the body than the cushion communicates, and that they're both interesting and worthwhile. And sometimes I just move around in my living room, and I kind of dance, and I move the body, and I do things like that. And sometimes I walk in nature. And I don't really think of any of it as a spiritual practice. I mean, I don't really draw a line between sitting and meditating, so-called, and doing the dishes, or talking to a friend, or writing a book, or whatever. It's just one whole happening. And in any moment, meditation doesn't have to mean sitting in the lotus position somewhere. It can happen on the bus, or it can happen anytime, any moment, just pausing for a moment and just noticing what's going on. And I think with any kind of true meditation, eventually the boundary line between meditation and the rest of life kind of melts away. Doesn't mean you might not still sit down in silence sometimes deliberately, but there's no real, you can be lost in thought while you're sitting on your meditation cushion, and you can have a moment of incredible stillness and openness while you're riding the city bus. And it's also not about being in any particular state all the time. I think that's a trap that people often get sort of into in meditation is, you have these great expansive, spacious, open experiences, and then you want to sort of get back to that or have that all the time or something like that, instead of just relaxing into whatever is happening. If there's tension and upset and nervousness, well, then there's tension and upset and nervousness. That's how life is manifesting. It's just energy, it's just movement, it's just consciousness playing, if we want to call it that. So does that help at all, or does that answer the question? Yeah. Anyone else? We have a few more minutes. There's one over here if we have the microphone.
Joan, I would just like to hear your take on this one. Nisargadatta.
Yeah.
He has a statement, life begins to happen through you, not by you, and I love that. But I keep seeing all the time people telling me that I create my own reality, and the older I get, I think that less and less. Do you have something to say about that?
Yeah, well, I think it's a wonderful question to live with and to really explore on one's own and not to take anybody else's word for it one way or the other. And I mean, I spent many years really watching the tiniest decisions as they unfolded. Getting up from the chair after I'd been sitting down for a while, deciding to come to this event or to leave, making a big decision like whether to get married or buy a house or whatever. Just watching the process and really seeing, could I find anyone in control of it? Could I get hold of the decisive moment? Could I say how that happened? And what I found is I couldn't. That every impulse, every interest, every thought, every choice, every decision happens by itself. Now, if I pick that up as a belief, that there's no choice and everything, that can become, grasping that can become another sort of debilitating belief in which a kind of slight misunderstanding of that would be that, Mom, my tire is flat, but there's nothing I can do. There's no me, there's no choice. I just wait. No, we're moved to respond and to act in some way. We're moved to work for social justice or take up meditation or pray or not pray or whatever we're moved to do. But when we really look, we see that it's all happening it's not happening, when we say that it's me doing it, there is no such, look for the me who's supposedly doing it. And can you find any such me in there? Or are there just thoughts that are popping up by themselves, like, go to the workshop. No, don't go, I'd rather go to this one. No, that would be good. No, go to that one. And then all of a sudden, we're going. And, and then we can tell ourselves a story that, it would have been better if I'd gone to that other workshop, should have gone there. But really, that's not what happened. And so that's just a fiction, that it would have been better, I should have gone to the other one. No, this is how life is showing up right now. And so that's just that kind of thought, like, it would have been better if I'd done something else with my life. That's just suffering. It's an illusion. And so I wouldn't say that we create our own reality. But that said, we can notice certain patterns and there's things we can do, but it's life moving. It's life moving. It's not me doing anything, really. But, again, I say don't take that on as a belief, but really, really watch and whoa, the little hourglass just turned over, which means my time is up. Yeah, so thank you all for listening and for being here. It's been Wonderful. Thank you.